If you're a high income professional, a subject matter expert, or somebody who works for a Fortune 100 company, and you want to start getting more income, more opportunities, even develop your career. Maybe you're an individual that's been laid off. I've been getting a lot of questions about becoming a consultant. You may not know, but for more than 20 years, I have been available in various means as a consultant for contracts, 1099, corp to corp. I've done side projects from here to there. I will be honest with you, there have been times where I focused on my primary gig, which was working for a Fortune 100 company, but I have always found it valuable to use the skills of being a consultant as part of my supplemental income. So as a individual who writes a number of newsletters and publishes articles and is the author of a number of books, I feel qualified to be able to help you with the consulting approach, but as a layman, because ultimately, if you do this the right way, you're going to end up with longer term contracts and you're going to end up with engagements more often than not. So I had primarily an 80 to 90% billable rate and could work easy 40 to 50 hours a week billable time. So I'm going to share with you some of those tips, but primarily I'm redoing all my websites, my consulting website primarily, the justinhit.com website. And if you'd like to come along on that journey, I would love to share that journey with you. Now, I just thought I could grab a couple of the books that I referenced, but instead I'm going to share with you the concepts, the key concepts. So first off, this is an episode of my newsletter, Inside Strategic Relations, which is where we talk about how to build influence and power. That is a newsletter website that has a specific newsletter value. Now, I'm not going to be sharing my screen or anything like that, but I'm going to read from my screen here because what I've done is I've worked with the Chat GPT and Google Bard and sharing both of my prompts in parallel to kind of outline some key elements that I don't necessarily agree with, so I'm not going to read what was given to me, but those tools are incredible for supporting the research that's necessary to know what goes into your site. So I'm advocating here that you have some kind of website that you'll use as a business card. In my case, it's justinhit.com, and that's my business card, my resume website, my consulting website, and I'm going to enhance it to narrow its focus for three very important reasons. Number one, when I'm working a W-2 contract with a Fortune 100 company, their compliance people freak the hell out and get worried that I'm going to steal some secret from their business and sell it as a consultant. Typically, high income professionals and consultants don't, they know the difference. They know what confidential information is confidential, and they'll even, when they talk about case studies and things, omit the customer details. Now, anybody doing a little sleuthing can tell that I worked with a specific organization over a period of time, and that specific organization's in a lot of legal trouble. But so they're really grabbing at straws if they're going to go after me as an individual who happens to own a single member LLC that's doing consulting work on the outside. But the majority of you listening have the good sense not to make the ethical compromise to actually do work that conflicts with your job. So number one, you need to make sure you have zero conflict of interest. So you want to have your consulting website or your LinkedIn profile or your business profile focus specifically on what is publicly appropriate and that does not present a conflict of interest, meaning there's no hard pitches, there's no, asking people to call you and getting on, calls. You're not publishing stuff in the middle of the day. Most of my videos are done at night. I think it's about 9 o'clock at night. I've dedicated some time to sit down and do this video. I'm not doing it in the middle of the day when I'm working with a client. So there are some key elements there that you need to make sure you present. Number two is that the website needs to focus on your intellectual property that is independent of your actual current job. Now, this is very important because people hire you for your expertise. Now, understand just because you have a job today doesn't mean you're going to have a job tomorrow. Anybody making 100,000, 200,000, $150,000 a year is on the chopping block, especially today with the way inflation is going, to get laid off if you haven't already been laid off. Because I will tell you that these artificial intelligence models are incredible. I have been able to do some wonderful things. Now, again, I wrote a book or in a special report for my clients years ago on how to ask great questions. And I've updated that report over the years. And there are certain ways to ask questions to elicit accurate information and useful information, because unfortunately, a lot of people are using AI today to write short stories or to do things that don't have direct impact on their job. Well, I do things direct impact on the job, and I want to make sure that the website telegraphs that value to the employer, but it's not talking about me particularly. Because again, if you're a high income professional, you are a commodity in the minds of companies. And to be completely transparent, I have helped organizations migrate data centers because they're going to lay off half the IT team. I supported the migration. I got it in place. I made sure my rates were as high as possible. And then at the end of it, they lay off 20, 30 individuals. I eventually get laid off as well. I've worked with organizations for a long period of time and moved between departments, knowing full well that there's going to be a reorganization, and actually had inside information from senior level executives and individuals who kind of let me know what was going on. And a few times I've been picked up out of one team and taken to another team because of the value I can deliver. Your potential client, whether a hiring manager, recruiter, or a consulting client, they don't care about who you are until they understand fully what it is that you can deliver to them, the value that you can deliver to them. The key thing in understanding this is that you create value in certain deliverables. So we'll talk about some of the deliverables that ChatGPT and Google Bard came up with for me as I remodel my consulting site. Now, understand, I could come up with these things myself, but I don't want to take 3 months doing it. So I use prompts and I use the skill set that I have to derive the information that I need to remodel the site. But number three, you want to make sure that your website doesn't convey a misunderstanding or a result. So for example, I have helped clients reduce costs and mitigate regulatory issues of more than $1 billion. Okay, so sometimes I'll say in my writing nearly $1 billion. $1 billion sounds like a big number, but I've worked with Fortune 100 companies. I've worked with four of the major Fortune, the largest banks in the world. I've worked with three or four of the major healthcare companies in the world, and two of the major technology companies in the world. In fact, I was on many calls where I'm the only non-Mandarin speaking person on Lenovo calls in their IT department, specifically working with DNS. I've worked in environments where we're working on actual congressional investigations and providing responses to massive audits. So that's how I can cost save and reduce the regulatory risk by $1 billion. However, I have a ledger in-house that lists out every single element and the mathematical calculations, because that number is unbelievable for the majority of individuals who very often think that $100,000 in salary is too much. Okay, because the majority of the planet earns, so the majority of the United States is about 55,000 a year total family income. If you as an individual earn $100,000, that's twice the family income for the typical person in the United States. But worldwide, $55,000 a year is multiples of the highest incomes or median incomes in the majority of the planet. So again, if I say I've reduced $1 billion, it's hard to believe, so I need to have the context around it. And then I have to translate it from what I was doing for Fortune 100 companies and what my books and reports were doing for $1 million plus, $10 million, $100 million companies. So while I'm working for these other organizations, and I'm spilling the beans here, I've had compliance officers in recent years concerned about this. I've had internal investigations on this because companies are really looking at ways to save money and letting go people who make $150,000 a year or more is a great way to reduce costs, but they need to, if you're making that much money, you have the legal means or acumen to go after them for unlawful termination. But long story short, um, I have evidence that I've delivered this value, but that evidence is unbelievable. So what I have to do is translate that to value. So I know many people who have worked on projects and they've created $100 million in new sales. They've created $50 million in new sales. They've had a cost reduction. I worked with somebody in the procurement world who changed the procurement system, was able to discover about $40 million in inefficiencies. So basically they were able to achieve the same thing the next year, but they were doing the achievements at a $40 million savings. How does that translate to a small business? Well, majority of your consulting clients will be small business clients. The majority of my clients, while I'm working full time for a Fortune 100 company or I'm working for a larger organization, the majority of those outside clients are going to be 1 to 2 day paid consultations, which I may take vacation time to do. I might do it over a weekend because they're out of sync. I don't have to physically be interacting with the client. I can write a report. I can create intellectual property. Or they're going to be a plan or report, which is what we call a done with you type of service. So I do a paid consultation with the client. I build a report or an approach. I might have a problem statement, root cause, and then a corrective action, a list of corrective actions. I provide that to the client, and then they're paying to ask questions as they implement that particular plan. So that creates intellectual property. Now, again, when you're writing reports, creating intellectual property, when you have a story, so if I have an inventory of the $1 billion in savings I provided to my clients, that means I have a list of achievements that I can then write case studies for. So what naturally happens is you end up with all of these artifacts in a library. And I'm not sharing my screen or anything because I do have some confidential stuff up on the screen here, but ultimately I have 23,000 articles and a combination of reports and notes that are in my system that are based on my personal experiences, my development over time, and ultimately that is content. So the natural result is to write books, to write reports, and to have a consulting website. So on a consulting website, there are only a few pages you need to have because it is a combination of a consulting website and a business card, kind of a brochure in effect. Now, the reason why it's like this is because you, like me, can't go into a lot of details about what you've done. When I worked for government contractors, we worked on Tempest and we worked on business continuity plans. I directly took those experiences and applied it to the IT world. I've risk management, including anti-money laundering, risk management, including all kinds of Bank Secrecy Act and stuff like that. I transfer those skills between organizations, but the specifics of what I've done, just like the specifics of what you do, cannot be talked about even in private conversations. So again, the consulting website is very simplified to give people an idea of what you've done, but it gives them an opportunity to contact you. So let's talk about what a website should have. Now, I'm going to tell you how I'm doing this presentation because you may be interested in it, but I have notes up on the screen and it's just bullet point lists. So I'm speaking to the bullet point lists. So if you're going to have a website and your clients are Fortune 100, your clients are $10 million plus businesses, your clients need to make a decision because they have problems they want to solve, you're going to have a simple yet professional layout to your website. So don't worry about it being nice. Have simple pictures. As you notice today, modern me has a beard, okay? But historic me has a baby face. And then if you go way back to when I started doing this stuff 20 years ago, I had an even younger baby face. And so I have decided over the years that I'm going to present myself as I would look in person rather than dressing up for my my business website. But when I'm on a client site, I do wear a suit and tie. Even with a redneck looking beard and long hair, I wear a suit and tie because that is my on-site attire. When I'm presenting myself on webinars, I wear a collared shirt. And, sometimes with the podcast, I don't have a collared shirt on, but I wear a collared shirt. So those are the type of pictures that I'm going to have on my site to be authentic. However, when you have longevity, there's pictures that are, all variations of that. However, you're never going to see a picture on a consulting website for me because my clients are larger professional clients that have a certain expectation. You're not going to see me in a shorts and a t-shirt. However, if you're doing business in a recreational industry, if you're doing business in the outdoor world, you may have a different attire. So it's going to be a simply designed professional website with relevant images that present you the way the customer expects to see you and how they will see you. So customers in the financial services industry do expect to see me in a suit and tie with a cropped haircut, nice and tight shaved face, but I work with international clients. If I'm working with people in New York, they want to see a nice clean face. But if I'm working with somebody in Saudi Arabia, in Afghanistan, in some of these areas that are really up and coming, then the way I look right now is perfectly fine. So I've made a conscious decision not to adapt myself too much to what my customers expect, because if I'm willing to compromise on the way I look, what else would I compromise on? So a professional looking design and layout with relevant pictures and pictures that represent you in a professional manner is that non-compromise. It's that honest and transparent and congruent look, especially in a world where you can get AI filters to make you look better. You want to look normal. You don't want to look on your website all young and everything. If I only had pictures from 20 years ago and then I show up looking like this, they're going to be surprised. They're going to be confused because I look different. So again, we're setting up the expectation with a professional site. Next, you want high quality content. This high quality content comes from what we talked about earlier: case studies, experiences, feedback, and reviews. You want to make sure that you print every performance review and take it home. Now, I do know that majority of companies believe their performance reviews are private property of the organization. Now, you don't need to do a Freedom of Information Act or a legal request of your human resources file, but you can discreetly get a copy of those files, because the other majority of the companies will allow you to have a copy of your performance record. But your performance reviews are gold mines for the achievements you've created and the activities you've done. And then again, high quality content would be case studies. It would be long form blog posts. It would be tying your skills and the benefit of your skills to specific events. Now we can talk about in a little bit what we do with those skills, because we don't talk about the skills as in I have this skill. We talk about you get this benefit. And so we'll go into that a little bit later. Credible testimonials. Now, in my case, I have extracted from performance reviews testimonials, provided them in a letter format to a manager or to somebody who gave me some feedback, and then asked them for permission to use those testimonials. In other cases, I've been given awards. And actually, while I'm thinking about it, I should scan a bunch of awards that I've received at different organizations I've worked at, because that, again, is credibility. But I've also received accommodations, internal accommodations. Now, I don't include a copy of the check I got for the accommodation, but essentially the organization said, hey, you've done so for example, one organization, I stepped in for a senior level manager. There's a vice president who left the organization, and I filled their role for about 6 months. Even though I wasn't the vice president at the time, I filled their role, took over the whole department until they could find somebody else to move into the position. Meanwhile, during that position, I hired some individuals to support the overall role. And then at the end of that, I was giving a cash bonus as I returned to a lead position. There was a promotion for my original role. So that type of thing is a case study. That's a huge value to the customer. Now, forming it in a credible testimonial that helps the other person see that a third party is endorsing. And see, that's where the challenge comes in. If you work for a big Fortune 100 company and you have this accommodation or this testimonial from them and you haven't got the right permissions, they may come back to you and say, please take that down, or that misrepresents the company. The big thing that I found with it, this is the first time ever I've had a compliance officer come after me, but I think it was because of some other stuff. But this compliance person explained to me that my website made it look like that I wasn't actually working every day, and that I was actually serving clients. And I rest assured them that they were my number one client, and that even describing my employer as a client. Now, when you describe somebody as a client, that's a mentality. That's a service mentality. An employer sounds like you're obligated, but a client is someone I serve, someone I look out for, somebody I make sure gets the best results. But again, that's not how human resources sees it. But so you need to make sure the testimonials for your current position are not on your website. Now, you can include them in a tear sheet or in collateral materials after the fact, but you can't use your current position in order to promote your next opportunity, because Human resources folks get mad. To be completely blunt, is the typical salary of a human resources professional is between 55 and $79,000 a year. If you're making 150, 250, $350,000 a year, they are jealous if you are making sure that you have an opportunity, because you know full well that making that kind of money in this economy puts you on the chopping block for a layoff. And so you want to make sure that you're not in a position where they're going to let you go because they think that you're this big shot outside, because the worst thing a company wants is someone who has choices. Now, I'm being transparent and on and really forward with you, because authenticity is the most important thing. Again, I'm not writing scripts with AI. I wrote an outline based on a conversation with AI, and then from that outline, I'm sharing with you my experience, because as an expert in my field, I can teach you what I've learned, the mistakes that I've made, and ultimately the experiences that can help save you a lot of time. You need a strong call to action. So your website is going to be like a business card, like a resume. It's not going to hard sell. It's going to have a list of your publications. It's going to have testimonials. It's going to have articles and thought pieces, but they always have a strong call to action. You want to make sure that the person reading that page, their next step is to contact you for a discovery call, a paid consultation, or to ask questions. Now, you're not always going to do it in that order. There are techniques you can use in order to offer maybe a free report, and then the report asks for questions. But again, if they're not calling you and talking to you on the phone, they won't see you as a unique individual. Now, this is difficult to do when you're working full time, but again, manage your calls, manage your schedule, and speaking with people is incredibly important. Now, you also need to telegraph that the security and privacy of your clients are intimately important. Now, as a publisher, and I have several newsletters, the newsletter sites are separate from the consulting work. But in the newsletter sites, I will have sanitized case studies. So I might talk about the business owner who had X happen, and here are the Y problems, and here's the solution they had. I'm going to sanitize that because confidentiality of clients is extremely important. I work on immensely sensitive issues with clients. As a strategic consultant, there are times when I'm asked to help fix things that the customer does not want to have in the public eye, and I'm under a non-disclosure. Now, much of your life as a high-income professional may be under a non-disclosure, but we still need to be able to promote ourselves and to market ourselves beyond our own network. So we want to demonstrate the privacy, so they shouldn't find confidential information on your website. We want to have the industry standard disclaimers of privacy on the website. And then we ultimately need to be able to make that connection that if someone calls you with a problem, you're not going to blab about it all over the place. Because one of the common feedbacks that I get is that because I run newsletters, I'm listed as a journalist. I actually have journalist credentials that I use when I'm interacting with events and I'm at conferences or seminars. There is a concern that as a journalist, I might do an investigative report on a particular item. So there have been times when I'm working with clients and they are not a, and this this is not a specific client, but they're conducting an activity which is suspected to be have ethical questions or legal questions, and we're there to determine that. And I've said it right up front, it looks like you're breaking laws X, Y, and Z. Here's the evidence of what we're doing, and here's an approach to remediate this situation. And I've had a client in the past, not very many, say, we're not going to fix it. We're just going to take our chances. And so I can't have a success if you're going to take your chances with getting arrested or violating a law or getting a fine. Now, sometimes the fine is significantly less than the gains from the activity, but from an ethical perspective, and I present an ethical solution, I opt out of doing that work. They may be paying me a lot of money. I'll raise the flag, and then I'll fire the client. And that's happened once or twice. And then even the problem of saying that, you have to self-edit, because you don't want somebody to go to your LinkedIn profile and say, oh, it's this client right here. because that client's got all kinds of problems. Not all of my clients are listed on the LinkedIn profile. I tend, for example, on the LinkedIn profile to provide specific examples of well-known clients, but the $50 million company down the street that asked me to take care of something that took 2 weeks to take care of, and I developed a written plan for them, and I deliver the written plan, and then I follow up with them in 6 months, and they say, yeah, the plan was great, but we decided to go ahead and take a chance. Then I'm going to say, great. But when they call me back in the future, if they haven't solved that problem and they're still what we've determined could be breaking the law, unless they've had talks with legal counsel, and that is additional information, my personality, my authenticity is to opt out of doing additional work with those individuals. So again, the security of your website, the SSL certificates, the privacy policy, those are the basics, but your content must telegraph that if someone calls you with a problem and they accidentally tell you what they're doing, then you're not going to go blab about it. You're not going to do insider trading. You're not going to go, contact their competitors. You're not going to do something that would be considered unethical if a third party were to look at it. Because as a consultant, you have a legal liability to do that kind of thing. So I might know where the bodies are buried, but I can, in writing between the company and myself under a non-disclosure, cinch that all up so that they can be comfortable that I'm not going to talk about it, because again, as a consultant, you don't necessarily know the whole situation. So your website's going to telegraph professionalism, but also the fact that you'll remain confidential. Now, in my situation, I have a religious ordination. So in the confidentiality of a pastor, parisher, conversation, because I have prayed with clients before. They've asked me to pray with them. I'll pray with them. And sincerely, though, there are conditions. But as a consultant, you're not protected by client confidentiality as a lawyer might be. So very often, if I hear something, I'll tell a client, don't tell me the details. First off, I'm not your lawyer. Second off, we're not in a religious engagement, and you're not sharing information under the understanding that we're having a spiritual or religious conversation here. So nip it up. Don't tell me. Hypothetically, ask the question. But again, that's the conversation you have one-on-one. That's why you have content that telegraphs the benefits. And then when somebody raises their hand, you have the conversation one-on-one, but you make it clear. For example, all my conversations are recorded. Do not say anything that is compromising your organization or the confidentiality of your organization. Number two, I make it clear that if you can't explain something to me without the details of an illegal activity or a potentially illegal activity, then I give them a special report. They can go do an exercise on their own and work on their communications. Because again, what I don't know is going to prevent the problem. Now, here's the issue, though. The problem of being subpoenaed by a law enforcement agency is what I'm trying to avoid. I do need to know about the problems when it comes to an actual engagement. So once we're engaged in a consulting relationship, and I'll take a W-2 sometimes because that way I'm covered under their legal teams, then I have to know the details. You can't hide anything from me. If you hide something from me and I suspect you're hiding it, I will ask magical questions that will make you spill your guts and tell me all the details of the nefarious things that you've been doing so that we can stop doing them and you can reduce risk. Remember, my area is business development and risk management, and they go hand in hand. You can't have a profitable company that's doing a lot of risky stuff for a long term. You can get short-term profits out of doing risky stuff, but technology today, eventually you'll get caught. But again, beyond mobile friendly and search engine optimization, the key symbolic triggers in the mind of your prospect is this consultant able to solve my problem? Will this consultant be discreet about solving my problem? Will this consultant make me look good? Have they made other people look good? And again, telegraphed in a professional design, you're going to deliver those things. So what are some key pages you're going to include on your consultant website? Okay, so these are the things that I'm going to narrow my website down to. I will be honest with you that over time, your website will start to grow and you're going to have irrelevant content. You're going to have things spread out. My website, I've organized some of my content by having my From My Desk newsletter. And that is a newsletter that I literally pick up stuff from my desk and then I talk about it for 15 or 20 minutes. That becomes a podcast episode. And then it's part of a larger paid newsletter that I have a handful of clients that they receive. Um, that's a means of organization. But beyond that, beyond the blog itself, you're going to have the key homepage that telegraphs the big picture about who you are and what you do. And in fact, it can have these other elements in there and then deep link into your site. It's going to have an about page that is going to be a biography of what you do for the organization, not particularly about who you are, but who you are to the ideal target customer, because you're going to write up a customer avatar somewhere so that you know who you work for. You're going to have a list of the services. Now, I found this is a little triggering sometimes to human resources. You may have a services sheet that a customer can request. Rather than having the services listed on the website. Now, instead of saying services, you could say specializations. And so I just made a little note in my thing here about specialization because that's a better way of saying it. And case studies. Case studies I like to include in my blog because case studies can be integrated into a kind of an experience for the reader, kind of they can see themselves benefiting type of thing. And then finally, contact information. Now you'll find out that pretty much all my podcasts, everything I say, go to this website, go to the contact page and ask your questions. Well, all of those contact forms are integrated into my customer relationship management system. And that way, when I interact with you, I can take your question and develop I can legitimately say I got 5 questions about how to set up a consultant website, and the conditions were some of them were employees that want to plus their income, some were employees that want to have a safety net by having some consulting work, others owned intellectual property, and some were laid off and they're looking for ways to supplement their income by doing contract work. See, all that's in my brain. I sit down and do a little outline and research. I put it on paper, and then I sit down and chat with you in this kind of long form setting to make sure that we can get you the key points that you need to start getting results. Now, again, you can do that while you work for another organization. You can do that while you are freelancing. But what we're trying to do here with this is share with you the what and why you're going to do to solve a specific goal. So in this presentation, for example, we're going to help folks that have a life after layoff. Many high-income professionals are getting kicked to the curb. I know you put out fires 24/7. You slept on site for 22 hours while you did work. You came into the office when nobody else was in the office. You work from home for all hours. During the COVID crisis, I worked around the clock. Like many of you guys worked around the clock, and then what happens? The company boots you to the curb. And so this is something that we're trying to solve for, and taking up consulting work is beneficial. Now, I will include links in the description here to the content I did. I don't know if it was earlier today or yesterday on the 7 ways that you can plus your income. And that applies perfectly here. But again, people are going to find your website, or you're going to send them to your website, and that's how they're going to get to know who you are in the context of what their needs and desires are. So you don't need a giant website. It can be a homepage, an about page, a services or area specialization, a blog, and contact. That's it. Now, in your blog, what kinds of blog posts are we going to post? Well, we're going to have blog posts that are talking about, again, the case studies, your successes, so all your achievements. We're going to have commentary. We're going to have thought leadership articles. Now, thought leadership articles are a little bit tricky. I wrote a book called, this is the working draft of it, Establish Instant Credibility. I would prefer you write a book or a special report that you can make available than to try to be a thought leader. I would rather you have a plan for somebody rather than additional thoughts. There's no shortage of ideas on the interwebs. We want to have answers. We want to have tangible results. So if that makes sense to you, you would write, a long form 2,000 words article, and then over time, those articles would form a book by plugging them into an outline. Now, I don't know that I have it right offhand here, but when you write something like this, Now, this book is almost done. It'll be on Amazon here shortly. When you write something like this, it starts as an outline, and then I write articles for each element in the outline. Then I put them all together, and then it goes through a couple of revision cycles. It's not hard to write a book. I've helped many of my clients write position papers and reports. So those are really long. You don't want to just give them away on your website, but the content on your website can raise an idea in the mind of your prospect, and then they can ask for more information, and then you can send them a PDF. You can send them a complimentary copy of the book. Um, I even, I'm going to have to get to it because I see it over here. And, a lot of these things I do real informally because I really just want to make sure you get the tools that you need. But this is my book available on Amazon, 101 Strategies for More Profitable Customers. It has my pretty picture. This is what I was talking about as far as my baby face. Look at my baby face from about, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, 5 years ago. I don't know. But again, this is a book. It's got an ISBN number and all that good stuff. And it's a manuscript format. So it's meant to be a workbook. It's not meant to be a perfect, I'm not Tommy Hopkins, or I'm not, the big name consultants. I'm somebody who helps you, with marketing strategies, and that's part of business development. But again, whether it's just a book like this, it doesn't, if I have a good qualified prospect contact me, we have a short discovery call, and I find out that they're just simply looking for strategies to get more profitable customers, I can send them this workbook. In fact, sometimes I'm just happy to get them out of my office because I'll buy like 50 of them for a promotion. I'll give 45 of them away, and then there's 5 of them sitting in a box somewhere. But this one is actually, I want to show you something here. This one has actually been niched for electrical contractors. So there was a bit of time I was working with $1 million plus electrical contractors, which was a different industry than my primary employment opportunity. And so I just basically, branded out some materials. And this is a master copy, by the way. I keep these masters sitting around here with little, those little notes in the front of them. See, it says proof. Because I will, I'll get feedback from folks and I'll write them in here. And so what'll happen, what's interesting about this one, is here's the about page, about Justin Hitt, and look where it is in the book. It's page 52 through 56, and then 57 and 58 is actually free resources. And then we've got page 59, which is specifically how to profit from this report. So I give them this report about how to get profitable customers, and then I tell them how to use this report to get more profitable customers, plus 101 strategies. And so it's a lot of value. And I don't know if that makes sense to you, but if you just put all this on the interwebs, it's not valuable because they get distracted. They're surfing the internet, and they find your thing, and they get to the strategy number 40, which is reduce waste materials by reducing materials, reducing scrap, and recycling excess office production. Turn excessive inventory into leads. How you are green makes great public relations and reducing costs. Tells me I need to edit this book at that line 40. But if they read this exercise online and it's not in the context of a self-development exercise, they're just going to skip over that. But really, if you're going to break down this, how do we reduce waste? If we want to increase profits, reducing waste lowers our cost. What if we have things in our organization that we can auction off, or we can use for charity, or we have surplus inventory that we can sell as parts? There's the exercise is lost if this is just a PDF file. So again, you want to create tools for your prospects so that they can take and make it practical. And of course, I have a pile of these. I'll be publishing more of these notebooks and workbooks and stuff because this is just, you can make $1 million with this right here. So what are we doing here? I've been printing out the website itself. You can see here's a printout because I've been going down here and I've been editing pages, and I've been writing out some key things like the who, what, when, where, your homepage. What's going to be on your homepage is going to be who you are, where you position in the marketplace, what you do for your clients, and then some kind of call to action. The key of what we're doing here is we are conveying the benefits of what you do for a specific audience. So how do we know what our specific audience is? I'm seeing this camera's going crazy. I don't know, man. Technology. Okay, so in order to deliver to a client the value before they pay you so that they feel comfortable paying you, because I'm talking about 5-figure deals here. I'm talking about consulting engagements that are in $100,000, $200,000 a year. Um, they have to feel that they are going to get something. So we do what's called results in advance. We provide results to specific individuals in advance by understanding their needs, their desires, and then we use a marketing to get them to raise their hand so that we can provide more specific solutions tied to their problem. So the more specific solution is a discovery call, which identifies the problem, identifies what they're doing to approach the problem right now, what would they like to have as a result, what is their budget, and then we start developing whether or not they're going to be a good match for your service. Now, an example of some of the calls to action you might have on your website, which would go after every piece of content, is, for example, and this is basically for me as my website, and these are notes that I'm going to use. So the hook is, are you looking for a consultant that can help you mitigate risk, develop new business opportunities, and manage your projects successfully? Okay? I'm calling out somebody specific. Now, the context of the website itself speaks to that specific customer avatar, that specific a high-level executive or decision maker, but this gets their attention and drives them to the next paragraph. I have over 10 years of experience in the consulting industry. Now, that's the Chat GPT there. I have more than 20 years of experience, 2 decades, and I have a proven track record of success. I help you achieve your goals by providing you with the expertise and support you need. That's BS. Okay. Not that it's BS that I don't do that, but your reader doesn't care. So the benefit you deliver is describing what they receive. You reach goals faster and more consistently. You produce results that are measurable and repeatable. You lower your risk and increase your profits. And then finally, contact me today to learn more about how I can help you. Another call to action might be, you know, contact me with your questions and I'll show you for free how to increase your sales. Contact me for a free report on 101 strategies to create and keep profitable customers. Do you see where I'm coming from here? This is extremely important to do. This is valuable. You can get people to sign up on a newsletter. You can get people to ask for a book or report or free materials. You can ask people to get into a discovery call. Now, what do we do in that call? We can talk about it at another time because it's going to be, I touched on it a little bit, but a discovery call is to make sure you're a good match. Because as you notice in this call, I'm not all rigid and, I'm not rigid and professional. Like, I'm pretty laid back. I want to listen to the customer's challenges. I want to think about the things that are going on. I want to understand their context and their outcomes that they desire. And I want to be able to do that in such a way that is less pressure on them. So I just act the way I act. I am professional in delivering the solutions. But again, I'm not there to bore the hell out of you. That's just not going to work. So while your website is like a resume, it can't be boring like a resume. It's got to extract from the resume the stories, the experiences, the benefits, the desires of a target audience and deliver them something of value. Now, the typical consulting website is going to have free ebooks. It's going to have free consultations. And it's going to have webinars. I think the webinars are more valuable because you get somebody on a call and you get to do an explanation. Now, I am thinking about doing webinars on some topics here and there. You may notice that sometimes I'll stop the video to take a break or grab something to drink. So I'm not as beginning to end unless we're in a dialogue. I can sit with you on the phone for hours. Now, we don't do that. unless you're paying for me to be there. But ultimately, I'm really about driving out solutions that you can implement immediately. And I can do that on a video call just as good as I can do it. Actually, I do it better when I'm working with somebody and we're brainstorming on the board and building out things. I actually have some brainstorming we did earlier today out on a whiteboard over here. But ultimately, I really think the webinar is a powerful thing. If you can get people in a webinar, you can there's formulas for webinars. You can answer their questions, and then the webinar itself becomes a product, an intellectual property that you can either offer for sale. Many of my products are built on webinars, or you can extract from it, or an assistant can extract from it and create more content for your website. Is content on the website necessary? I think you can get away with 40 really good articles. I don't think you need to have thousands of articles. I've got websites with like 400 or 500 articles on them, and it's a lot of maintenance work. Now, if you're going to hire somebody to do maintenance, like I have a webmaster, see, that's the confusing thing for a lot of your employers. Once you start doing this, you're going to create some residual income from your LLC or your consulting agency. Maybe you have a marketing agency if marketing is the area you're in. And then you're going to have like 2 or 3 virtual assistants putting out social media, answering prospect inquiries, gathering materials for your clients, the deliverables for your clients. You're going to be doing the bulk of the work. You're going to get a work package. You're going to complete the work package, give it back to your assistant. They're going to deliver it to the client. They might even edit it and proof it. And then ultimately you're done. So it doesn't have to be an everyday activity that you're doing here if it's set up correctly. So the free books, even though they're easy to produce, I don't think they ever read the PDFs. I know for a fact we use the Adobe has a digital rights management option where I loaded images from my own website, and I found that if I had 100 downloads, only 3 or 4 people actually read the PDF file. And again, that's why I prefer a real physical book. So I know I can put 10 people in a room in this industry with this book, and we're going to leave, and each of them are going to have $1 million in new business. Because if we're there for a day, we're going to actually have, at the end of these things, there's action steps. After you work through chapter, you write in the book the actions you're going to take. And then it's easy to translate this to your team. So I like to double space. See the double space there? I like the manuscript format because this is a getting results book, not a put you to sleep and read book. These aren't thought books. So I have profit strategies. I have take action now. I have a high level of responsibility for the end user. Now, what this does is the end user, and you're going to, of course, in a longer form book, you're going to embed case studies, testimonials. You're going to recycle your blog posts. But ultimately, you want that person engaged because once they understand what the problem is, once they understand the root cause, once you've outlined some corrective actions, they're going to want to solve that problem. And who will help them solve the problem? Who has shared the experience and insights necessary for them to identify these problems? Who has helped them prioritize? Well, that is you and your resources. And so often they'll come to you for a done with you, which means you're going to help them, or a done for you, which means you're going to do the work for them. Now, here's the challenges going back to what I talked about before, because I was very real in explaining to you that you could get fired from your job if you are consulting on the side the wrong way. And so you have to understand that you can only have so many done with you clients or even done for you clients if you're actively engaged. So if you're actively engaged in a major Fortune 100 employer, and I'll tell you straight up, for almost 10 years with my last major employer, I did not do any done for you work that wasn't something I could sit down and do in a half a day. So I wasn't doing 3-week engagements, 4-week engagements. I was doing one job because inside that organization, they had enough problems and enough different things going on that I did not have time for the other things. But I did do a large number of new newsletter subscribers, Q&A. So my podcast kept going through that time. I did special reports, including special reports that are unpublished. So I would do an hour-long consultation call. I'd do a written assessment of the company, and then I would take and build a plan for them. And of course, the plan is some of the outlines I've described there. And of course, those plans were peppered with my case studies and research information. I've written technical papers and stuff like that. But again, those are things that can be done outside of regular working hours so that there is not an ethical compromise of a conflict of interest. I also chose industries that are outside of financial services. So I just want to clear that up because it sounds exciting when you start getting these phone calls because you have a consulting website that's done the right way. It gives just enough information for them to know that you have value to deliver. You've had the opportunity to talk one-on-one, and I've done a lot of conferences. I've done a lot of events. I've spoken at small groups and large groups in the industry. I've got a LinkedIn presence. So there are times where people will call me and say, Justin, I need your help. I say, well, I can't help you. I can't do the work for you unless you can hit these numbers. Well, I can't hit those numbers, but anything you can do. Okay, well, let's do a report. Let's do a plan. Let me be on a couple calls and I'm going to help your team out. But I can't do it within these hours because I'm working. So 5 o'clock in the morning, we're going to meet and we're going to talk about the situation. 8 o'clock at night, we're going to meet and talk about this. Oh, no problem, Justin. Because again, they've been invested in my materials. They've been a newsletter subscriber. I've built credibility with those individuals by being authentic, by being transparent, and by being honest with what I can and cannot do for them. And so reinforce it with artifacts, and they will be more than happy to be blessed by your experience and by your activity. Now, again, what is the benefit that you can provide as a consultant to organizations? Now, I can tell you the benefits that I deliver. You may have more benefits, but you definitely will not have fewer benefits. First, number one, as a consultant, you increase efficiency because you're not a part of the problem. You're an outside set of eyes that comes in and built based on your experience and your assessment of the situation. It is a consultative diagnostic activity as if you were a heart surgeon. You don't just come in and somebody says, I'm having trouble with my heart. And you say, great, get on the operating table. We're going to do open heart surgery. No, you do diagnostic tests. You look at the situation. You research the industry. You go and look at the root cause. So that you look at the problem statements. You build a root cause. You build out some corrective actions. But you may even have a packaged plan based on what you've done before. And so my more than 20 years of experience, I've actually got, I think, 40 packaged plans in the area of business development and the area of risk management, some of which I've extracted into podcasts. So if you take the time to go through the podcast, you can get an idea of what I deliver. But what I also do is reduce risk because many of these plans have been implemented with hundreds of individuals. I have clients in more than 72 countries. Like I mentioned Saudi Arabia earlier, Pakistan. Now, when you're working with other countries, there is the ITAR, which is the international, I think it's international, is regulations. So I have not worked with Pakistan during the time in which Pakistan was embargoed by the United States because we were in active conflict with them. So there was a time when Ukraine, I had a bunch of software developers out of Ukraine, but in 2014, the U.S. sanctioned Ukraine because of some activities that were going on over there, and I lost my developers and I had to move them to India. So I've done work with people in India, Philippines, Singapore, China, Taiwan, um, a lot of countries. So again, the plans are tested. I have a specialization. I take lots and lots of notes. I synthesize those notes into plans, and then we apply those plans for specific things. So I'm reducing risk by not only identifying and mitigating risks, but by packaging up the best practices of a synthesis of all the companies. So I haven't taken best practices from Wells Fargo or best practices from Bank of America or best practices from Maritime Dynamics or best practices for General Dynamics or all the other organizations I've worked for. But I've taken a synthesis of those things because even the best practices don't work if the context is wrong. So I tend to work on the context. Next thing we do as a consultant is we help improve decision making. One of the things that your consulting website will do is help the decision maker choose you over anybody else that's available. Not only to choose you, but to make better decisions about hiring internally and externally to solve problems. You want to help them have timely information to make a good decision. There are many times where I'm just hired for an hour or two because a venture capitalist firm or a senior level executive has heard through the grapevine that I can answer a specific question. Of course, we don't talk about confidential information. We don't share anything that would be not publicly available, but we do talk about strategy. So, for example, I worked on a project early COVID where I was hired by an organization to determine whether or not COVID was a lab leak or whether or not it was a naturally occurring. So I went and deep dived into the research methods is one of the things I have a high level skill in. And guess what? My report was very accurate according to what we're seeing today because there was substantial uh, details that it was quite possibly and most likely a lab leak. But that was a confidential report at the time that we wouldn't dare broadcast publicly. But again, we had information about the SARS-CoV virus being available in 2006 and that there were patents coming out of certain labs and that there have been lab leaks before of Ebola, other things going on. And then I delivered that report to the client. They paid me for the report and it doesn't compromise any of my other relationships. And it is something I can talk about now because that was in 2020. If you're not aware that COVID was around in 2019, late 2019, I actually had COVID in late 2019. But long story short, one of the things that I was able to do is improve decision making because this organization knew early that it was likely not something that was going to be as dangerous as the media was making it out to be, and that they could make certain decisions and take certain actions despite people panicking. And I was part of a group that made this research happen, and ultimately that organization has done quite well. What other activities? So a long, long time ago, we did a risk. This is before 9/11. We did a risk assessment for an airport about potential security flaws and vulnerabilities in the organization. And I say we because I will hardly ever do something all by myself. I always seek out credible experts, and I often provide a proxy between credible experts and the materials that get written down because sometimes I get insider information or I get other information that I have to have that ethical barrier. Okay, so somebody says, here we're doing this, I have to sanitize it because we can't trade on that information. So if my client was a investor, I can't pass along information that would help the investor unfairly or that would violate securities and exchange laws and rules and regulations. Anyway, I'm reducing risk. I'm helping them improve decisions, and I do that through reports and materials. Those are some examples of what you can do. Now, the most valuable thing that I'm able to do is enhance growth. I've mentioned that I've helped people migrate data centers. I've also helped with strategic marketing plans, launch new products into new countries. I've done quite a few different things, including launching RCSA models and implementing risk management programs and doing assessments. Again, you're able to enhance growth by developing new business opportunities, by managing projects effectively. These are things that are high value you want to be able to do. Now, one thing that I thought was interesting, based on some feedback, I am not the one to improve employee morale. I am definitely not. Like I mentioned before, I have worked on projects pre layoff and pre right sizing and pre reorganization. Now, I do so discreetly and respectfully, understanding that people are going to lose their jobs. But very often, when we optimize business process, the number one objective of my executive level clients is to reduce headcount and to reduce financial costs. And they will say right up front, here's a list, and here's how much people make on this list. So I will tell you that I've been involved without my manager's knowledge with senior level executives who have come to me in client situations and employment situations and said, here's a list of everybody based on your understanding of the high level process, based on your understanding of the controls and risks associated with this activity. who can we let go? And I've had to make decisions about, I usually do it on roles because so sometimes managers want to look at individuals and they want to have the managers make the final decision, but they put up a suggestion list or they put up a kind of a overall suggestion list and they'll sit around and talk about it. I like to abstract it into roles because what will happen is if you let go of a person and you're not aware of the multiple roles that they carry, you could actually get rid of somebody who is a high income person and they are secretly or off the books covering for other people. And then when they go, you have a cascading effect. So what I will often advise people to do, not that you're going to care if I'm I don't really care if you think I'm a heartless bastard or anything, but it's not a useful exercise to look at the individual. It's a useful exercise to look at the business process, to look at the risks, the controls, and then to look at the roles and then make sure the roles are properly staffed. And then once the roles are properly staffed, then you can make decisions because it's like musical chairs. Once everybody's sat in a role and you've gone through and interviewed everybody, those people left standing around doing nothing, they get let go. And then it's not a big deal. Unfortunately, human resources and many times mid managers want to start cutting based on the numbers. And that's why I can, with quite high accuracy, tell you that if you're making a higher than average income, if you've ever received that notice that you're a highly compensated employee, you're already on the list because there was nobody on that list making $30,000 a year. And I'll tell you right up front, when I'm helping organizations do business process outsourcing, which is basically offshoring, I've been let go because I work on a team. I trained up the India team. We were told that the India team was going to help us service around the clock and follow the sun, but actually they were there to replace us. And so I was part of the people that got let go. Again, I want to work in facts as the world really is versus fantasy as how we really would like the world to be. And so I am the worst person. I might improve employee morale because the people that are left behind are not overloaded with a bunch of surprise work and they have clear roles and business processes and the controls are well developed and they're able to not have extra audits and stuff. But I am the least valuable player when it comes to helping people feel like they're a part of a team. Because if I'm not on the winning team, I will actively look to either make the team win or to get on the winning team because I don't want to be around a bunch of losers. I don't want to be around a bunch of people that are making questionable ethical decisions. I don't want to be around people who are doing things that are going to come back to haunt them because I've always been taught, number one, that it's best to do things right. If you don't have time to do things right the first time, you won't have time to do them right later. Number two is that you are responsible. Speaking to me, internal locus of control, I'm responsible for my behavior. And number three is that if you're going to compromise on little things, you'll compromise on big things. So again, you might improve employee morale, but I don't actively make people mad at me one-on-one because there's usually a very strong rapport, but there have been times that middle managers have said to me that so-and-so thinks you're too aggressive after I had a 2-hour conversation with the other person and they were sharing with me confidential and personal information about their life because they're having challenges and we're solving problems as part of the engagement. Or the manager of the manager who's coming to me or the manager's manager's manager had come to me and asked for confidential advice. Um, it's an interesting world to be in. But when you're able to develop effective solutions for the organization that are effective by the numbers as well as by the measures, because pleasing people doesn't solve the problems. Okay. Being a yes man might get you this contract, but it's not going to keep you employed for the long term. And it's not going to help you make artifacts. This is the thing. The artifacts is the power. If I can hand you a report on how to create instant credibility, I can hand 500 people this report and they all get results. That's the thing. That is when you are working and you're making the results happen. And by the way, it doesn't always work out for me. Sometimes I get let go from a contract just as much as I might let go a client from a contract. Or sometimes I could have drawn a contract out much longer, but we're finished early, and so I move on to something else. So again, having the website is powerful. Having the LinkedIn presence is powerful so that you can constantly be looking. A great mentor of mine, he's a software configuration management guy. I would mention his name here. It's actually um, WT. It was recently your birthday, and today is April 13. So it's recently your birthday. Sir, you provided me the most beneficial and valuable advice, which was every month be looking for your next opportunity. You might be gainfully employed where you're at, but always be looking for another opportunity because number one, it's going to help you understand the marketplace. Number two, you're going to identify the problems that need to be solved. Number three, if you do get a better offer, you're going to upgrade your situation. And number four, you'll meet people. Number five, you'll expand your expertise and your network. WT, you're the man. Years and years ago, he was a board of directors person for my business, and he just made a huge difference in my life. And I think the gentleman's retired now, but I don't have his permission to share who he is, so I will just leave it at that. Let's talk about some mistakes. So I've shared the importance of having a business website. I've shared the importance of having a presence on LinkedIn. I wouldn't invest a lot of time and effort in having detailed content on LinkedIn because, again, that's their medium. You want to have people on your website because of some of the analytics and the search engine things that we talked about earlier briefly. But there are some mistakes to be made. And by the way, I know I'm covering these materials very quickly, and I know I speak very fast, and you may not be getting it all. But again, you can listen to this video slowed down and take good notes, and then of course ask your questions at www.insidestrategicrelations.com. So let's go over some mistakes. Here are some of the most common mistakes consultants make with their business websites. Number one, not having a website at all. Now, I have made a practice of looking up highly intelligent people who I highly respect, who I believe are great performers in the organization that they're in, and they invest 100% of their time in their employer. And when they're laid off, I look them up to see how they've been doing. Now, I know that's a little heartless, but I keep a library of people who are highly valuable because I refer business to them. If I can't handle it or they're a better specialist, I will refer business to them. But here's the problem. I can't find them on the internet. I can't find them on the LinkedIn or business networking channels. They are invisible to potential employers. Now I know they're hustling because I got their email address, so we're talking back and forth. I know they're hustling to find a new opportunity, and they're trying to find recruiters, and they're doing this and they're doing that. But they are invisible for somebody who's looking for their specific skills and talent. Now, as part of building my network, if I come across something that they're good at, I'm going to refer people to them. But it's so much easier to refer people to a website because very often if I don't want to give their email address away. I don't want to give their cell phone number away without their explicit permission. So I'll take the recruiter's information, contact my friend or a peer or previous coworker, and I'll say, hey, this person's looking for X. I think you're ideally suited. And then I leave it up to them to contact the other person. It would be more valuable to the recruiter or to the hiring manager if I could send somebody to a website. If you don't have a website, you're missing out on a huge opportunity, even if you're just looking for your next employment. If you're already publishing trade articles and publications, if you're already writing books, reports, and materials that you publish, if you're already speaking at trade events or conferences, if you're already a credible expert in your industry and you don't have at least the basic website, then you're missing out on the opportunity of really creating a personal brand and establishing instant credibility. Now, this report isn't specifically about a website. It's more about the resources that you can give as evidence of your value, but the website is a great place to start. Number two, having a website that's outdated or poorly designed. Okay, that's the problem I'm running into right now. My website is outdated. I haven't updated it in years. I've been so busy working with clients. I finally have a time to start narrowing down some content. I did find out that I included some information on my website that I have better examples today. Now, some of the blogs and some of the posts, I've already updated some of those posts. I found that my keyword concentration is kind of spread out a little bit. So again, the website is outdated. I think it's poorly designed, and so that's something I'm going to work on myself. It is professional, it is trustworthy, but again, it's hard to find stuff on it, and somebody really has to look hard to understand the details. And then I have information that distracts from the key ideas. So we're going to clean that up. Not having a clear call to action. I do have some call to actions, but it's not as good as the call to action I talked about earlier, which is basically a paragraph. So here's a little tip. If you have a WordPress website, you can use an advertising banner rotator, and you can create a little tiny rich media ad. And if this doesn't make sense to you, you can write in with your questions and I'll share some information. But you can create a rich media ad that advertises you as a professional and then has a call to action, whether it's a special report, whether it's to join a free newsletter, whether it's to get a discovery call. You can rotate those ads so that every page on the website, and I learned this from Jeff Paul, who's a famous infomercial guy, and Jeff Paul has been on the internet forever. The only purpose of a web page is, number one, to generate a lead, or number two, to sell something. So you don't want to have 50 different call to actions. You want to have your key content that establishes and positions you as an expert. It telegraphs the value you deliver to a specific audience. And then at the end of that, you're going to have a call to action, which you could rotate in order to see which call to action works best. It's not just send me an email and we're going to talk. Now, these are common mistakes. There are other mistakes that you can make, especially in how you use social media. You don't want to be on social media sharing political opinions. You can share that behind the scenes on your personal newsletter, but don't get out online and say something stupid. You want to make sure that you're professional at all times. And oh man, we could talk about this for hours. If this is a topic that you're interested in, I could do a whole session about the prospect newsletter. Because a prospect newsletter, whether you're a full-time employee or whether you're a consultant or any combination thereof, a prospect newsletter is a great way to start building up materials for a book while serving the existing customers. At one time, I had 250 recruiters in my industry on my prospect newsletter. 250 recruiters, okay? And I had to hire an assistant, okay, I basically was getting a lot of offers. Hey, we're looking for a senior systems administrator. Hey, we're looking for a risk management consultant. And I'm happily employed. I'm happily doing something. I've got enough private clients that I'm very happy with where I'm at. So I actually hired an assistant to basically farm these contacts to my network. And some of you guys have seen these things come through. And basically, I helped get a bunch of my friends jobs. And I don't put that into my count, but people were getting better jobs. Usually, the typical employee, for what you're hired today, in 5 years, you're going to have half the buying power. You might have a higher salary, but you'll have half the buying power because salaries don't increase as fast as inflation. So some of my friends were getting 10%, 20%, 30% increases in salary. Some of them were getting side job activities, intellectual property activities, joint ventures, all the different things that we've talked about in else places that would add $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 to their income. What would it mean to you is this: if in addition to your regular job, that kind of side work, you were making a quarter to a half of your actual take home? It would make a huge difference to a lot of people. It makes a difference of my kids going to private schools, or my kid going to a private school versus going to a public school. And for some of my clients, it makes a difference for their kids going to private school rather than public school, getting the very best education that they can and a good, safe, and healthy home, because the financial capability is there rather than just being there. One of the benefits of being a consultant too is that you can work remotely. I very often work remotely, but again, you don't have to be McKinsey and Company, Boston Consulting Group, Bain and Company, Oliver Wyndle, Deloitte, whatever. I've worked with all those people before. I've actually recently worked with KPMG, Deloitte, and Oliver Wyndle, and PwC. Most of these organizations have consulting opportunities that you can work for them under what I guess it's called a white label. But when I work for some of these organizations, I am their employee and I keep my name and everything quiet, but I do a technical report or a research study, or I translate materials. Now, I'm not one of the young, handsome MBAs applying all these stuff, but I will review the MBA's work and make sure it looks good before it goes to the client. I've also worked with clients on the other side of these folks, doing regulatory investigations, doing control validations and testing, preparing packages of information that would be delivered to these folks. You don't have to be these people. You can be the independent consultant that has a specific subject matter expertise who is brought in specifically for that. And I'll give you a few examples. A friend of the family was a chemical engineer, and he became a patent attorney. And as a chemical engineer, he specialized in patents in the chemical engineering world. Now, he worked for a firm that was his legal firm. That was his primary client and occupation. But on the side, he wrote um, non-patent related intellectual property tied to specific types of chemical processes and applications. So he wrote on his specialization to keep fresh in the industry, but people paid him to do that. So one of the things that I've done in the past is I've used my consulting work to stay current on things. So instead of going to a training class, I get paid by a client to write a big paper on a specific topic, and they might publish the white paper to sell their products or services, or their engineers might use the white paper for something. But again, I get that engagement in my brain that you may not get in a long-term career opportunity. I think we should really wrap this up with this key thing, is that you can deliver project plans, business plans, marketing plans, all kinds of deliverables that are written to clients while you're working some other job. You can be an advisor. At one time, and there's no shame in this because I don't have a doctorate in engineering or a doctorate in business or anything like that, but I have actually written and edited for doctoral candidates their dissertation papers. So sometimes these papers are 200 pages, and we'll sit down and I'll interview them because I have a skill in the interview and evaluation. We'll sit down and we'll discuss these things. I'll go through biographies of their board. People are going to review their document to make sure that the cover letters are clean and stuff like that. And I've done probably about 100 of those over my career lifetime, and master's papers and stuff like that. But again, it's intellectually stimulating for me, but it's something I can do in addition to my 40, 50 hour a week main client, or between contracts. As you'll see on my LinkedIn profile, there's sometimes a year or two gap between these major contracts. Well, some of that is because I put the majors on my LinkedIn profile, and all the minors, which could be a 3-month contract, a 6-month contract. Um, Sometimes they're overlapping contracts because they're part-time activities. Um, these activities are not on the resume on the LinkedIn because there'd be 70 or 80 different companies there, and it would be distracting. But again, if you can do a risk assessment, if you can provide, so last week I did an expert opinion on privacy policy and answered a series of questions about the implementation of privacy policy in general for a financial services firm. Probably 10 pages, maybe. And that's something you can do. Again, training materials is something that I do in the back end, like these books and reports. I even have, and it's almost compulsive for me, boom, optimize your YouTube channel. So as I'm managing people that manage my YouTube channel, I wrote down the best practices and took notes, and then I implement best practices, and we test methods and strategies and ultimately create a way of doing it. So what I want to leave you with is that the normal career development opportunities of the past, which is business networking, continuing education, and even speaking, can be monetized today if you'll consider the concept of being a consultant. So you look at yourself as a freelance operator who has contracted yourself to a specific company, but leaves open a few slots, manages their time so that you can support additional clients. Many times within an organization, this allows me to deliver extra value beyond what I was hired for. And that's why I'm able to generate the income that I'm able to generate. I have made multiples of the lifetime earnings of the typical American. I'm not saying that to brag, because doesn't mean I got piles of money sitting around here. It's because some of this work is very expensive. I mentioned I've hired staff. I've invested in researchers. There is a margin in consulting, but ultimately this is about building your retirement. This is about building financial security. This is about honing your subject matter expertise so that you have more valuable value in a workplace, and ultimately finding new and exciting opportunities. As a knowledge worker, you don't want to be bored. You want to constantly be challenging what you do to make sure that you're able to provide good value, because very often you'll see they'll bring in people with stuff that just doesn't work, and then they'll struggle and they'll spend $1 million or $2 million, and you'll be there to get things back on track, to fix the problems, and to use your experience and subject matter expertise. This counters all the problems of getting older and there being real age discrimination in the workplace. This solves all the problems of being on the target list when it comes to cost reductions. And we're really facing a time today with artificial intelligence and a global economy that there is someone in this world that could do your job for less. And if all the company looks at is the cost of doing the work rather than your expertise and value as an individual, then you will find yourself without work. So I hope I've shared something here. At a minimum, set up a basic website. You should have yourname.com, not the actual website, your name, but my name's Justin Hitt. So I have justinhitt.com, which is the basic site that we're remodeling as we speak, so that it focuses more on a consulting website. It needs to be a resource for recruiters, hiring managers, and potential clients. It needs to not offend any of them, but ultimately make it clear that you won't compromise your morals to work with organizations that are doing things that are indiscreet. But if those organizations, and I really should mention this, organizations that have problems are the ones that hire consultants. So you must be willing to help them solve that problem. So like I say to my clients, if you're earnestly trying to solve these problems so that you are not violating regulations, so that your laws, rules, and regulations are clean, let's do a validation. Let's do a risk assessment. Let's do a problem statement so that you can get the issue straight. And if they're willing to do that, I'm all for working for them. I have been contacted in the past by organizations that wanted to launder a large amount of money. And I'm not talking about the you know, the email scams. These individuals had a network and they were looking to move a large amount of money from one country to another. I don't do that kind of work because it has I might have made a lot of money in the short term, but it doesn't have long-term value. There's no way I could be more than 20 years in an industry if I was violating federal and state laws or even international laws. I bring to the table risk management and business development that is sustainable, that develops long-term business relationships and helps organizations have measurable profits. There's something that you can provide ethically, legally, and of massive value to organizations. Now, the big organizations do pay more, but there are many $50 million to $100 million companies that pay as well. And that's really the power. But again, if they can't find you because you don't have a website, and even if they do find the website, if it doesn't speak to their needs and give them an opportunity to raise their hand and talk with you, then you're going to miss out on $1 billion of opportunity, $100 million in opportunity, because consulting is where it's at. These senior level executives are on boards and they're doing consulting, and they usually end up with books and they end up with radio and media presentations. There is no reason why you can't have that level of engagement, even if you don't have a public engagement. But it starts again, having the basics on the website, having some key positioning content, and then ultimately building up a library of materials to position you as an expert. I'm Justin Hitt with Inside Strategic Relations. That's my newsletter that helps high-income professionals, high-net-worth individuals, and affluent families position themselves for greater influence and power in their community so that they can have long-term financial security, individual personal decision-making, and long-term freedom, no matter what, freedom and liberty in a marketplace. I know that's a big mess of things, but ultimately, It helps you do more of what you want to do with people that are worth having around you. And if you have questions about this presentation, which has been about your consulting website, some of the things that we're doing to improve my site, you want to visit www.insidestrategicrelations.com. Go to the contact page and ask your questions. Again, I'm Justin Hitt. I have a newsletter called Inside Strategic Relations. It includes a podcast, a website, and more. I would love to hear your questions, and thanks for spending your time with me here today. You make a difference about the content I produce and the results that I generate for clients. I learn as much from you as you will learn from me, and I hope what I've shared today has been actionable. I'll see you in the next program.